Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the Rutgers situation with Antifa, with the
Yes.
teacher, and how I think you were with her in person, and unfortunately, Rutgers is now investigating this person.
Yeah,
Give
it's a whole
us
thing.
more of the backstory there.
So right, Dr. Antifa. This is the story out of Rutgers University. Again, back to New Jersey, and once more a taxpayer-funded public university. It's sort of the University of New Jersey there, where they have this guy who's been on their staff since about 2018, I believe, and his name is Dr. Mark Bray. And he's the guy who wrote the anti-fascist handbook. So if you remember when Keith Ellison famously held up that picture of the Antifa handbook, this is the guy
Yeah.
who wrote that book, Dr. Mark Bray. He is someone who unconditionally calls for what he calls preemptive self-defense. And
Mhm.
preemptive self-defense under this moral and ethical framework, it means that if someone is a fascist, if someone is a xenophobe, if someone is a bigot, then they are prone to violence. And therefore, if this person is prone to violence, then you, as a good, right-thinking individual, are ethically and morally justified and, in fact, obligated to use violence against them before they use violence against you. So
Mhm.
what does this mean? This means he's advocating for violence. He's advocating for violence, and he talks about using guns. He talks about using small arms. He talks about using explosives. He even talks about using heavy weapons. And again, this is all in his book. And he's sitting up there. And by the way, he got ran out of Dartmouth University years ago for preaching the same stuff. And in the wake of Charlottesville, even the president of Dartmouth totally denounced this guy, Mark Bray, said, "This is not what we stand for at all. We got to get rid of this guy." So they got rid of him. Somehow, though, they passed the trash up to Rutgers. Rutgers gives him this part-time speaking spot. So in the wake of Charlie Kirk's murder, he's still up there. He's preaching the same old gospel of violence and hate up there at Rutgers every day. So the
Mhm.
Turning Point chapter, and it's led by these, these two young girls up there, Megan and Ava, and they launch a petition. They said Rutgers should get rid of this Antifa professor who is harassing us, who is calling for violence against members of Turning Point, and by the way, contributed to the violence and certainly the ecosystem that led to the murder of the leader of Turning Point USA. When Charlie Kirk was shot, the killer had written on the casings, "Hey, fascist, catch." And had also written the phrase Bella Ciao. Now, Bella Ciao is a reference to a song, which a lot of people may not realize. You may have heard the song, but a lot of people may not realize that that's also the international anthem of Antifa. That's Bella Ciao. It's a communist song from World War II.
Yeah.
And so these symbols are very very, very familiar to someone like Mark Bray. So
Mhm.
they launched this petition. Again, they're two young college girls, right? He says, he turns around, this again, the famous tactic of the cry bullies and the theater kids that make up the far left. He
Mhm.
screams that he is now being put under threat. I tweeted that he, as a professor, is supporting domestic terrorism.
Yeah.
So then he says that because of me and because of this petition, he has now been forced to flee the country and has now fled to Spain and is taking essentially a taxpayer-funded vacation in Spain paid for by the homeowners of New Jersey, and saying that he has to do all of this because he's afraid for his life that these young college girls have launched a petition against his violent rhetoric. Now, in
Mhm.
response to all this, you'd think that Rutgers would come in and try to turn down the temperature, try to find something, maybe
Mhm.
compromise. I don't know. What has
Mhm.
Rutgers done? Rutgers has put our Turning Point chapter under investigation.
Wow.
So they're under investigation now and looking at possible disbandment. They're suddenly saying, "Oh, there's some problems with your paperwork. We were looking at your filings just randomly, all of a sudden in the midst of all this Dr. Antifa scandal. And,
Mhm.
it looks like, you said you were at this campus, but actually took classes on this campus." And I mean, just ridiculous stuff
Mhm.
where they're now coming after our students. They're coming after our girls. They're coming after our kids who have already been faced with the violence and the rhetoric of Dr. Antifa, Mark Bray. And so our response to all of them has been very simple. And I've talked to Turning Point headquarters in Phoenix about this, is to say, Turning Point will stand with its chapters. Turning Point will defend its chapters. And if Rutgers University wants to find out how good Turning Point's lawyers are, they're more than welcome to.